We now have our environment set up. We have both Visual Studio Code and Rider installed, and we've taken a look at the general structure of a project and how to make it. Next, we'll take a look at the starter tutorial. So in this instance, it's creating an application again, and we'll try and add a control. That's the real entry point to this. So before we begin, let's spin up a fresh terminal. And you want to do this every now and then. What we're going to do is ensure there's nothing new. So we're going to run .NET new and update. And what this will do is update any templates. So this is not going to happen very often. But if we ignore these warnings, we can scroll up and it's updated by 1. So it has actually updated in this instance. It's gone from 12.0.4 to 12.0.5. So run this periodically to ensure your templates are up to date. And then personally, I'd probably recommend making an Avalonia template from command line when you're making a new project, because if we use something like Visual Studio Code, it may or may not use the underlying .NET tools to create a new project. So if we wanted to make a new project in VS Code, I think, to be honest, you have to use the command line anyway. There is no real concept of, new project. But if we were to use Rider, so if we open up Rider here and go, say, new solution, you can see these here. I'm pretty confident don't use the underlying .NET new to generate them. So you can see here, for example, it's got the wrong version there. So we know it doesn't use that version. So instead of using these to make a new app, I just recommend sticking with the most common is do it from terminal. Now, I'm not a big fan of using command lines. I like user interfaces. But for this instance, let's just drop to command line. We'll cd into desktop for now. We'll make a dir, so make a directory, and we'll call this, in fact, we'll put a new folder in here called Avalonia. We'll cd into that, and we'll start putting all of our projects into here. So inside of here, we'll make a new folder. In fact, we might not need to make a folder, but we'll make one for now, and we'll call this one controls. We'll cd into controls, and then we can now do .NET new Avalonia.app, and I believe we should name it as well. To do that, it's just -n, and we'll call this one Avalonia controls. That should create us the project in the desktop, inside controls, and here we go. So we didn't need to make a folder. That's just good for noting next time. And then it's gone ahead and made us a project. There's no solution, but we don't need one for now. So we can come out of command line. I'm going to move this up a folder, and we'll just delete that subfolder now. So what we have here now is the Avalonia folder, and inside we have the controls, and in here we now have a CSproj file. If we open this up in Rider, we have to trust the application to see it. And then you've seen this before. We've already been over the structure of the application in the last video. So you should be aware of how all of this generally works, what's in here, that the main window basically is the entry point to the application. And at some point we'd want to split this out into a main view, not a main window, because browsers and phones won't use a window. But for now, we're happy with that. And we want to focus on adding a control. If we take a look at the documentation, we can click into add a control. And we can see here, it tells us to go to the main window and add, for example, here's a text block, and we've got some binding, which I don't believe we have in the template. So let's take a look. If we look in here, there is no binding. So we have no view model yet. So instead of doing this, let's take a look at the template. Let's delete Avalonia controls. Let's spin up a new terminal here. We'll do .NET new Avalonia, and this time we're going to do MVVM. So in fact, .NET new list, it is Avalonia.mvvm. So that will be .NET new Avalonia.mvvm, and this will add the view model binding for us. We haven't done this template yet, so I'll give you a quick overview of what that is. Avalonia controls, let that create, all done. And now we have a solution in here. And if we open this one, let's take a look now at the differences. You can see in here, I believe we will now have a binding already. So straight away I can see here we have a data type. So this is part of view model binding. So when we do x:\data type, what we're saying is the data context of this object here, so the window, is going to be a main window view model. So I need to show you the process of how this ends up getting injected, but for the view here that we're looking at, it just means now that inside of here, where we have this binding, it's going to expect main window view model. You can see here in the gray. And if I was to change this to say 2, you can see obviously that's not a valid model, so I can't really show you that way. I could change it to view model base. View model base, there we go. You can see here now it updates to view model base. So all we're doing is telling the XAML here what to expect when we say binding. So that's all it's doing. It's not actually binding, it's saying what we're expected to pass in. So we set it to main window view model, and that means we need to actually set window.dataContext in order to see it. So let's first take a look at the view model itself. We have a view model base here, which is nothing more than an observable object. And then the main window here, main window view model, inherits from that, and it sets the greeting to this. Now, we haven't done MVVM yet, and this is all manually bound at the moment. So don't worry yourself too much with view model binding for now. Just understand where it is. So this is the object, it has greeting on, and inside of this text block now, we can bind to any properties on that model. So if I were to put a space, it's going to expect and search everything on that model. So you can see here, greeting is a public property on that model, and that's where it gets found and discovered. To create the text block, like anything in XAML, you just open the angle brackets, type things like button, text block, label, image, any control you like, just like HTML, and then properties on the model like text are just added again like HTML. So fairly standard XAML stuff. So we're setting the horizontal alignment to center, the vertical alignment to center. So this means that the text is just going to be centralized over the text block. If we want to see this, we can go up here and click this preview, and then we need to build the project first in order to see it. And then once it compiles, I'm going to click this button here to change the orientation to over there. I can zoom out, say to 75%. Doesn't seem to do much. I think the zooming's broke. There we go, just refresh the zoom. And you can see here the text block is just floating in the center of the window. Now let's say we wanted something other than a text block. We can delete that entire text block, and let's type, say for example, button. If we press tab, it finishes off for us, and we can put in here hello world, for example. You can see at the moment in the window, it is now left aligned, but still vertically centered. If we wanted to change that, we can go inside the button here and put, for example, vertical alignment top to move it to the top, horizontal alignment center. So it's now top center, or we could change both of these to center. We can also shorthand this. So instead of having if we make another button, or let's just delete that button. If we were to do, say, button, and then we put content in here, you can instead, so we don't have to have an open and a close tag for the button, we can instead shorthand it with just a / here. So this is a shorter syntax. And now we can do content and then hello world. So I prefer this syntax, similar to how this one's done here, but it's preference, and sometimes you might need to embed things in content that you can't just do as a string. For example, if the content wants to be, say, another text block or an image or another button, not that you'd ever embed buttons, you can't really do it easily in this context. So instead, if we wanted to say, have inside of here a text block, which is almost what it is anyway, content or text testing, you can see we've now embedded a text block inside of a button, which gives us the same visual, but it's not the same as doing content. That would be, I think, a label. But if you're not doing anything special and it's just going to be strings, you can shorthand all this to this format, which is just cleaner in my eyes. So a bit of a preference, but it's good to know. And these things in terms of XAML context, so content, horizontal alignment, all these are technically called attributes. So in the XAML world, this is an attribute, but ultimately I call them properties generally, because if you tab into them, they are ultimately public properties on the control. So here you go. This is a public property and we're setting a value, and this is just living on a class. So they are properties, but they're technically called attributes in terms of convention and naming in XAML. So that's all there is to adding a control. However, let's touch on binding. So at the moment, instead of putting hard-coded testing in, if we open and close curly braces and type the word binding and put a space, this will then do what we've already seen, which is it's going to look for, when you've typed binding, what the data type is in the containing class. And because the highest level is set here for data type, and we haven't set it anywhere else, for example, on here, changing the data context to something else, which you can do, it's going to take the top level, which is this. So it's going to look for properties on main window view model. That means we can do greeting, and magically it's now saying welcome to Avalonia. We'll cover view model binding in more depth in another video, but for now I'll give you a very quick overview of how that's ended up there. Typically it would be in this ViewLocator. So what this is a little bit of code that's expected to map data contexts or view models into views. We're not doing that right now. This is a boilerplate class that looks for, if we had something in views called, say, main view, not main window, it's going to expect, if we had a view model called main view model, it's going to replace the word view model with view and look for the word main view and then try to create an instance of main view. So ultimately, if we had something called, I don't know, home page view model, and we had a home page view. So if these two things existed in view models and views, and we had a home page view model getting passed into the rendering system, we would have this injected so it automatically fires. It would try to build this. It would come in here and find homepage view model as the view model. It would replace the word view model with view, so you'd end up with main view. And then this control activator would try to spin up a new instance of the view, so the XAML. You don't need to concern yourself with that right now, but that is what it's trying to do. However, in this instance, you'll notice this isn't called main view. It's called main window. So how does it work in this instance? Well, it's just simply in the application startup. So we explicitly just set the data context at the moment to main window view model. So this is the thing I mentioned, the data context on the main window. If we went into here, data type is telling us what the data context should be, which is main window view model. And then that's exactly what we're setting here. So we are literally just newing up a class and setting it to the data context. This is kind of a exception to the rule at the moment, but we will convert all this to dependency injection and correct view model handling in the future. So that's all there is to adding a control to an Avalonia project. You can simply come in here. One thing to note is, for example, if we try to add a second button, you're going to get an issue here where it's going to complain that we can't have two top level items inside of the window, because when we put a single content inside of here, this is just going to be set to the entire Windows content and there can only be one. We'll tackle that again in another video.